All right. Okay, a very good evening, brethren, and welcome to the 7th in the series of our Young Masons virtual interclub social here on Zoom. A huge thank you to everyone here this evening, and thank you for your continued support of the virtual social. It really means a lot to everybody involved. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Barry Hayward from the Essex Cornerstone Club and Matty Brown from Prawsome Semper, who work tirelessly week in, week out to make these social happens. So like I said, we have a new Facebook page. I'm just going to hand over to Barry Hayward of the Essex Cornerstone Club, who will just do a few advertisements.
So as Mitch said, we do have a Facebook page now, which we set up a couple of weeks ago, and we've started to add more content to that as we've had more socials. So we just want to let you know that that's there. That's where the recordings will go. It's a private group, so you can only join if you're a Mason and you join security. You pass the security questions, so it's not there for everybody to see. But please do share that with any other brethren that you know on the square. All you need to do is search for Young Masons Interclub Virtual Social on Facebook. I'll put a link in the chat as well during tonight's session, so feel free to join. Thank you.
Fantastic. All the details there. It's a pretty new group, but one that's already had it's been quite popular. So do get yourselves on there. Lovely. So we'll take this opportunity again to thank everybody for joining here this evening. It's great to have you along. It really is. We look forward to tonight's social and hearing from, obviously, the Trelawny Club of Cornwall and Mike Neville too. So thank you all for joining. So we're going to start the virtual social, and we are going to first hand over to our guest club. We're very excited to have you. It's great to have our brethren from the Southwest, because us in Wiltshire like to say we're Southwest, but you're proper Southwest. So we look forward to welcoming you. And I'm going to hand over to Callum and Nick, who will give you their presentation.
Testing, all good? Okay, good evening, brethren from around the country. My name's Callum Gardner. I'm the current chairman of the Trelawny Club down in Cornwall for our light blues. Quick intro about myself. So I've only been in Freemasonry approximately 5 years. I'm current Regimental Master of the Millennium Lodge of Cornwall, which is based in Perranporth, pretty much slap bang in the middle of the province. Serving in the Royal Navy, so tend to throw myself in and do everything all at once, as you probably guessed. We've got a great team behind us at the committee. As of 2020, as pretty much a whole new committee turnaround. So I've got a little presentation, a little 10-minute presentation that I'll take you through in a second, and then afterwards I'll open the floor to if anybody's got any questions. Okay. Okay, so as I stated a moment ago, my name's Callum, current chairman of the Trelawny Club. Okay, I'll just run through a few things. So we'll have a little talk about the history of the club and the current key roles that we have got. An overview of the province of Cornwall for those that have never really looked down that far into the southwest. A few difficulties that we do face currently, and then our aspirations for the future and what we're currently dealing with. And then obviously, as I said, we'll open up some questions. Okay, so originally the club started in around 2012. A number of the brethren from the province, who are two now lead provincial officers. One of them is actually currently Assistant Provincial Grand Master, David Laity. Over time, various members of the committee has changed, but although we originally started in 2012, it really took its big push in 2017. We had a whole new turnaround of committee members, and we tried to push it with the social media and really step it up, kind of like you guys have been doing. The latest reconfiguring is obviously from March 2020, as I stated earlier in the presentation, and we were all elected into our certain roles, and then obviously COVID hit, so we've all really had a bit of a kick straight away, which we'll come on to a bit later on. So as is the case with all clubs of this nature, membership in the province is automatic to anyone who joins in that light blue form. So we wish to encourage and engage the guys. Having said that, we do actually have quite a few key members of the province actually affiliated with the club, really because we're not trying to discourage anybody. We're trying to be inclusive with everybody, but it kind of does work regardless. We got a couple of members I'll talk about in time. Worship Brother Eugene Clements, who's actually currently the Provincial Grand Mentor. So obviously what comes with his actual role, he also works in a secondary school. So he's got a lot to offer us to sort of, infuse the younger generation. If we get any needs arising, then they're a good liaison for the provincial executives as a direct point of contact. Worship Brother Simon Taylor, who's currently Assistant Grand Director of Ceremonies, and he's actually the Provincial Membership Officer. So if there's anybody you really want in your inner circle for the committee, is Provincial Membership Officer, obviously, is a great advantage. And obviously Simon works in a university campus as well. So we've got some real key players with some good stuff to like I said, to attract the younger members and sort of, maintain that consistency. So although we had some great, we had an AGM in March, although we had some great ideas, we have obviously with COVID had to take a step back. As we're doing tonight, the Zoom meeting is very much high on our priority list at the moment to sort of get those ideas flowing, etc. Current history of the club. I'm the chairman. Vice chairman is Brother Ant Wilkins. He's ex-military, very, very keen, enthusiastic, and obviously when you've got your right-hand man with such enthusiasm, it's great to have. Currently works for Great Western Rail. We're trying to tap him up for some sort of transport up and down the province. Secretary Nick Anir. Nick is online tonight. He'll say a few words in a moment. He's a great guy. He's got lots of time that he puts aside, and he deals with all of the silly questions that I get, and I literally just cannon fodder him. And then we've got Brother Perrin Clements, who's actually, his father is Eugene on the previous slide. Perrin owns his own business, a cycling business. Very, very down with the kids, shall we say. So he's our kind of Twitter, Instagram, social media guy. So what we've done, when I talk about the province in a moment, we've brought up these clusters, really just to sort of break down the province into smaller areas, having cluster groups, and then we'll have a cluster lead. So that cluster will say, for example, right down the very southwest of Cornwall, there might be, say, 17 lodges. They will focus on, making sure that the newer members in that cluster are all getting touch base, liaising with them, any help or questions on any ritual or any etiquette or movements or questions or anything that's required. And we've got those cluster leaders throughout the whole of the province. So I was talking to Mitch Bryan the other night about Salisbury Plain being an issue for location, and we're pretty much the same. So it's a bit of a blurred photo of the Cornwall one, but right in line with Newquay, we've got Bodmin Moor, and it's just a huge 30-mile sort of stretch where there's not a lot available. So for us to go the east and west Cornwall divide to do any visiting, it's like a 2-hour drive of really, really rural roads. At best, you're going to get a dual carriageway. So Bodmin being the hurdle that it is, these cluster groups work quite well because we've actually got members who are actually in the east and the west who are making sure that the Trelawny Club is becoming sort of spread to the deepest, darkest extremities of the southwest of the province of Cornwall. So that's something that we're trying to push out at the moment. And then within those clusters, we're going to talk about the official meetings. So initially, when we started with regards to the Trelawny Club going and visiting, it was almost a bit of like the same sort of circle of 4 or 5 people that would go to, for example, half the province and down to the same sort of lodges that they were all affiliated with anyway. So the idea is to announce 3 huge official visits, one in the west, one in the centre, and one in the east, where we literally try to get maximum attendance and totally max out the lodge capacity, touch base with everybody and really to show a presence in that form. So when it comes to us putting on events days, etc., everybody's actually affiliated with the fact that we've had these big, huge meetings, and then we've gone en masse to those places rather than a wishy-washy presence when we're trying to go out and not recruit, but sort of make it more appealing for the newer members. So as you're probably aware, Cornwall is quite a bizarre shape, with it long and thin, and it's a 2-hour stretch. For you to go from, for example, I live down in Hale, which is right down near St Ives. For me to go to Saltash, it's like an hour and a half up, then the whole meeting, and then an hour and a half back. It does have its issues. So that being said, we have got 1,422 light blue members in the province, which is a huge number, and it's only about 100 out from having the same in provincial. So we're about the 2,700 mark. Active members currently in the province. It seems to be positive. We don't have as many resignations in the last couple of years from new joiners that were brought into the fraternity and then sort of left to go stale. The mentorship and the inclusiveness of the light blues clubs and the little smaller cluster groups is starting to show, and people are maintaining that attendance, and they're not resigning. So it is a hard place to get to, but we try and push on. So I'll move on to the next slide. Topography, I've already talked about that. Time is a huge factor for guys to get around. The main issue for the topography part is that if we're going to do a social thing, it needs to be central, that the east and the west guys can go. So places like Newquay and Virgin on the St Austell mark, which is the halfway point, seems to be like a recommended sort of distance for everybody to make the hour trip into the centre rather than obviously going out and about. I think historically there's a big push for the Trelawny Club in the south, but in the north of Cornwall there was people that wanted to get involved that didn't really have the ability. So demographically we can see that the Cornwall has tightly linked to the topographical issues, and also as a fact that Cornwall doesn't have as many like higher paid jobs, and it tends to be the relocation issue. So like an average wage of, for example, the train drivers down here is completely different to say up in London or in the big cities. So even in the same sort of qualified jobs, people aren't sort of matching the pay, and as a result it has a difficult push on Freemasonry and getting out and doing the extracurricular socialising. And a few people that I spoke to when I first came into the chairman role, and I went out loosely just canvassing to find out why people weren't attending coastal walks or Trelawny Club breakfasts, etc., members' breakfast, and it tended to be the similar sorts of answers. But with those difficulties, gives you the opportunity to think of ways to mitigate that. So if it's an older new joiner, say for example someone who's joined Freemasonry late in their life, they may be put off with something that maybe the younger light blues will have been keen on. So motorsports or something that's like quite intense. So you just got to try and put those ideas out there and canvass what the interest is throughout. So last one, COVID-19. Obviously, I mentioned it before. Our AGM was in March. We all got placed on our places. So, for example, we had about 3 weeks where I was chairman. COVID came in, and then it's literally put the brakes on to us. So, ideally, we're looking at putting those ideas on brainstorms and putting them together so that we can then push forward for the present and the future. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we roll over this committee positioning for another year, so we actually get an opportunity to sort of make an impact. We've had some really, really good guys down in the province over the COVID-19, where they've been helping out with volunteering for the NHS, working with blood bikes, fetching and carrying for older, shielding their own isolated brethren, etc. A couple of the temples down in Hale have just had a refurb from a couple of the guys that all the gates outside were looking all rusty, so they've literally stripped them right back, repainted them, painted nice gold squares and compasses, and renovated doors, and done a lot of the DIY work that maybe the temple probably needed, but there was that sort of time-bound thing where we couldn't sort of shut the temple down for a certain amount of time to actually get that DIY done. We've some guys that have been furloughed or have been at home have actually put their time and got out and done some really, really good work. So there's some great stuff to get back in the chair and look at pushing. So looking forward, we're individually with a few Zoom meetings, etc., starting to plan social events, fundraising for our festival. So our province has got a 2024 festival. So we're currently about 18 months into the festival. It's obviously taken a big chunk of our time now where we're not raising money for that. So the Trelawny Club will be looking at working alongside the province team to put on some big official visits and events, and then start gaining money into that festival. Formulating a plan of attack. We don't need to be wary from detracting the individual lodges. It needs to be more of a sort of a social team, and we try not to get sucked into that bad habits. We want to try sort of keep evolving, and then keeping people giving us feedback throughout and thinking, do you know what, that maybe this doesn't work, how about you try this? And then if we can evolve with the times, then I think that we will be able to push ourselves on. So with a whole new fresh committee, there wasn't any room for, well, we didn't do it like this last year, or we didn't do it like this year before. I think it's something that's completely new to all of us, and we've got a really, really good team together that's going to push on. So the idea is just really to assist with Grand Lodge with the festival. The Trelawny official visits, like I mentioned before, the 3 official ones, keep it simple, keep it small, 1 in the east, 1 central, 1 west, and then plan a bigger one up to, say, Grand Lodge in London, stopping off on the way through over a couple of days. I think that's an aspiration that we may have. So rather than me summarise and go through the rest, I've just put up a poem. So Brother Anthony Wilkins, who's the vice chairman, is the Masonic poet, and he's got quite a good tongue. So if you cast your eyes over that, if you're interested, I can send it to you. But he's got about 35 or 40 different Masonic poems that he's affiliated with different ceremonies and different Masonic etiquette and movements. So some great stuff. Any questions?
Brilliant. Thank you, Callum. That was really interesting. Great to hear from you guys, and it's so refreshing to hear that your members are really sort of using their furlough period to really help the lodges within Cornwall. A few questions for you. I'll read these because we're running short of time. But this one is from Paul Ashby from Cambridge. He says, "Where is your furthest west lodge? Is it Penzance?"
Our furthest west lodge is actually on the Isles of Scilly, and it's really hard to get to because of the helicopter flights or the I can't even say it now. The Solonian, the ferry to get across. So only a small amount of people have got there. So out of the 82 lodges, that is the most furthest out of Cornwall.
Sure. Joey Holstead has also said, does your province include Isle of Scilly? If so, do you find it difficult to involve yourself and engage with your brethren on the Isle? I think you've answered the question, but how important is it for you to bridge that gap and try and socialise with them?
Yeah, totally. There's a couple of the members in the committee are quite avid visitors. Adam Barbary, who's lived in Newquay, he's made it his plan over a 12-month period. He's going to do all 82 lodges. And we were planning to go in June for their initiation out in the Isles of Scilly. But we was going to have to do like a couple of days out there because you're going to have to fly out and you have to be there early enough in the daytime to get to the meeting and sleep over. But because the Isles of Scilly's tourism through the summer is so busy, to get a room in June, we had to book it like January, February time. It's outrageous, but because of COVID, obviously we've had to cancel it. But my aspiration is to go with him and obviously try and push the Trelawny Club over there. It's hard really because I can't say to people on the Scilly Isles, by the way, come and visit us up in Cornwall, because they've got to then fly over and make a meal of it, you know.
Sure. An interesting dilemma to have, a problem to sort out, but yeah. This one's from Matty Brown. Callum, because you have your provincial Grand Mentor on board, do you find that you liaise and work well with the lodge mentors to help promote your initiatives?
Yeah, totally. We're really lucky to have Eugene on board. he's literally got all the time in the world, and all of the individual mentors he is in contact with at all times. And you know, I think he's a breath of fresh air. He really is. He is pushing it.
Great. And final question from Jim Brown. Callum, I'm speaking as I imagine I'm Jim Brown. No one can replace Jim Brown, of course. But Callum, I used to live and work in Bude, North Cornwall, and still have friends there and visit quite often. Are they just too far out for your clusters, or do you have members from that area? No,
totally. We're inclusive of all those areas. I know that up in Tintagel, there's the King Arthur's Castle, and there's a King Arthur Lodge up there. And I know that there's people that are affiliated with those sorts of areas, so everybody's included. And my partner works in Exeter, which is just inside Devon. So for me, Exeter is a good sort of like launch pad for me to do the North Cornwall lodges. So I'm kind of like looking at the lodge diaries to sort of like tailor those Exeter ones, so I'm not having to go too far from my end of Cornwall.
Fantastic. All right, lovely. Thank you for answering those questions. Fantastic presentation, very much enlightened. And like, if the brethren want to put more questions to you, happy for us to email you or have another meeting, and we'll put that up on the Facebook page.
Yeah, of course, no problem.
Fantastic. All right, brethren, you will. This part of the evening is where we get the other clubs to give a welcome and an introduction to their club. Because we are now a fair few clubs in, it does take time. We don't want to keep repeating the same stuff to, especially the guys that have been here all the time. So we're going to just limit the hellos and welcomes and from the clubs to 10 seconds. We've already pre-selected the guys. So I'll mention your name. Please unmute yourself and just give a quick hello and welcome to the Trelawny Club. Okay, we'll start with Essex and Barry Hayward.
Hi, Barry Hayward, president of the Essex Cornerstone Club. We are a young Masons club in Essex, obviously, and we accept Masons up to and including 40 years of age. A big thank you to all the club members here this evening, and Callum, it was great to hear from you, especially the kind of geography issues that you have around just getting to people. It's really interesting, so thank you.
Fantastic, thank you, Barry. And we'll head over to the Cologne Club, our latest club to join, and we'll go to Lee Thomas.
Hey, thanks, Mitch. Evening all. Welcome and thank you from the Cologne Club. Thank you, first off, for all the kind words and messages we had after our presentation in the last talk. We're a light blue club based in South Wales. We take all light blue members all the way up to the age of 45. Congratulations, Callum. Wonderful talk. Very interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you again for the invite, guys, and I'll pass you back over. Nice to see you. Cheers.
Thank you, Lee. We'll head over to Leicestershire and Rutland and Bob Ray.
Thank you, Mitch. Good evening, brethren. Bob Ray, chairman of Leicestershire and Rutland Light Blue Club. Thank you, Callum, for the great introduction to the Trelawny Club. I certainly look forward to arrange a visit to you once we get back to some level of normality. Big fan of Cornwall, all that has to offer. And I'll bring you a warm welcome from all the members and myself, and we look forward to hearing from Mike Neville shortly.
Thank you, Bob. And to Scott Redpath of Prawsome Semper.
Good evening, brethren. Thank you again for inviting us. Well done, Callum, on the introduction from the Trelawny Club, and from all the members of Prawsome Semper, welcome to yourselves. I'm really looking forward to this evening and the main presentation. So thank you again. Cheers, Mitch.
Thank you, Scott. And to David Little of the Sarsen Club.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of myself and all the members of the Sarsen Club, I just want to say a massive welcome to all the members of the Trelawny Club. Callum, fantastic talk. And also welcome to Mark and Mike Neville, and really looking forward to your talk this evening as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And finally to the Holywell Club and Chris Field.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm Chris Field from the Holywell Club of Sussex. We're more of a perpetual white table club. So we have no restrictions on rank or age. We're simply to get enthusiastic Freemasons involved in social events and giving a calendar to people, to lodges that wouldn't have otherwise had the facility. So thank you very much to great to find out about the Trelawny Club, and yeah, really looking forward to the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate it. All right. Okay, so Mike Neville began his policing career with the Royal Military Police in 1983. He then joined the Metropolitan Police and New Scotland Yard and established himself as the Detective Chief Inspector in the charge of solving crimes with CCTV and other forensic images. His systems and processes resulted in images solving more crimes than fingerprints and DNA. It's an honour and absolute privilege to welcome Mike to today's Young Masons Virtual Social, and I now hand over the microphone to you.
I take it everybody can see that, yeah, Mitch, yeah?
Yes, we can see that, yeah.
Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here. As has been said, I was told to talk about my life, so this is an amalgam of various presentations. I'll go through my Masonic career. I mean, I'll speak later about that, but I'm really, my mother lodge is in Surrey, Frederick of Unity, number 452. My chapter is a Frederick chapter of Unity 452. But I'm also a Mason in London, I'm an honorary Mason in Suffolk, and I'm a Yorkshire West Riding Mason, to my eternal shame, because I'm actually a Lancastrian. And I'm also a member of several other orders. I'm a Grand Officer in the Mark, Allied, Royal and Select Masters, Red Cross of Constantine, and Royal Art Mariners, or something else, probably, but I've got a wide Masonic background. But I've got a very full life, as has been discussed, and I'll go through them about my policing and my super econisers, some bits about my Freemasonry, my authorship of books. I'm also the Commandant of Army Cadet Music, and the secret I found to all this, well, I sort of combine different bits of my life all together. As has been said, as you can tell by my accent, I'm from the north, but I'm from Bolton originally. So I have endured being a Bolton Wanderers fan, albeit rugby league is my true love. And as has been said, my police career, there's a rather thinner version of me in West Germany in 1983. But I joined the Met in 1989. I served at Clapham Police Station, which is near a block of flats. There was a massive increase in robberies at one point. So what happened was, I was a young detective. This is the early 90s. The banks, bookies, and the betting shops, they took the screens down. And what happened was the armed robbers of banks and the like went from being sort of 40-odd-year-old white men in stocking masks that you see on the Sweeney to young black guys who are 14, 15 who would leap over the counter and steal money. Now, I was running the Army Cadets in Brixton at that time. So people trusted me and would tell me. So the first one hit was a William Hill's round the back of the station, and I was presented with a book of photographs because you didn't even get CCTV footage in those days. And this was the start of my sort of policing discovery into how the police don't use images really successfully at all. So if you know, in the UK, there's been a massive investment in CCTV. Billions of pounds have been spent by the government and also private businesses. But the mistake is that they bought it to prevent crime. So the idea was you put a camera up and people don't commit crime. But of course, if you're mad or bad or evil or drunk or on drugs, you really don't care if there's a camera there. And if you're clever enough to know that you've done 6 crimes in front of the camera and no one's ever arrested you, then you can carry on doing it. And the most iconic crime is the Jamie Bulger case, which you can see on the left. That was actually solved by Albert Kirby, who you can see in the middle, who had the privilege to meet, actually. I was running a concert for some residents of the RMBI home in Liverpool, and who should be the volunteer driver but him. So if you ever see Albert on the TV, because he's always on about the Jamie Bulger case, he is a Mason in Liverpool. But that was the case that really pushed CCTV in the UK, but it was set up in a very, very bad way. And so what I set about doing as I was promoted is to make images as effective as fingerprints and DNA. And it's still not right, because if you if you're from Bolton like me and you commit a crime in Glasgow or London and you leave your fingerprints or DNA, they will find you because it's a national data. Even if you travel abroad, somebody's just getting undressed in front of us here. So even if you travel abroad, Interpol can still find you. With images, if you get the CCTV captured in Cornwall and you're from Devon, the two different police stations probably don't swap the images, and so it's not as good as it should be. This is what I'm sort of fighting to do. And in 2008, I made some comments at a conference. It was strange enough, it was at Freemasons Hall. So I came back from Manchester and gave a talk, and there was only about 20 people in the audience, but what I rapidly found out is not how many people are there, it's who is there. And there's actually a report from The Guardian, and I reported that the use of CCTV in London was an utter fiasco. So it was good to be headline news on BBC One. I was in the Sydney Morning Herald and the New York Times. But of course, the police don't like this. Like any public sector thing, if you reveal the truth, the easiest thing is to shoot the messenger. And they tried to shoot the messenger many, many times. It's actually outrageous how they carried on. Rather than sort out the problem, they targeted me. But and this is what I found, that the management of images was appalling. But what sort of saved my bacon really was the London riots of 2011, because the police were faced with 200,000 hours of CCTV, and I was called in and given an apology. We're sorry, we should have listened to you. And so the London riots, I could shake the hand of the guy who burned down Croydon, because it made a difference. Out of all bad things comes some good. And so the London riots sort of put me on a track to arrest more criminals. And what I did in the police is I created a database, so all the images went onto a database, had some metadata and descriptions, and this was the first time ever, and it's still not done in most police forces, that there's some a way of searching through to say, show me all the people involved in robbery in Brixton or all the people involved in burglary in Clapham. You can see one of the journals we created. In the middle row, you can see on the right hand side, there's a lady with rather big breasts. One of my sergeants rang me up and said, is there 3 suspects in that image or only 1? But so if you're ever in Uxbridge, that you know how to keep your eyes out for. But the reality was, though, as I circulated more images to the police, what I found is if I circulated 100 images, I didn't get 100 officers ringing me up telling me names. I had certain officers who would ring me up and say, give 20, 30, 40 identifications in a week. And I thought, well, what is going on here? Are these just good officers, or have they got some special ability? And I met a guy who was a facial expert at examining faces. And together I met Dr. Josh Davis from Greenwich University, and we found out about this concept of super recognizers. Now, where this comes from is the actual theory. It comes from Harvard in the States, the university in the States. And the Professor Russell there was studying people called prosopagnosics. Now, I challenge you to say that after 3 glasses of red wine at the festive board. But a prosopagnosic is somebody who can't even see their own face. So if you look on the left-hand side, that is how a prosopagnosic would see their own face. And what Professor Russell said, well, that all human abilities, whether it's learning Masonic ritual or doing mathematics or playing chess, that most people are average on the bell curve, but at the far left and the far right, they're outliers. So he said if there are people who are so poor that they are prosopagnosic and can't even see their own face, there must be people who are super recognizers. And you can see on the right hand side, the guy with the red bandana, that was identified by a guy called PC Gary Collins of Hackney Robbery Squad, and it just shows how people have this amazing ability. And so what I did, I set about organising how the police dealt with images. So with fingerprints and DNA, we've long been able to say that these 5 sets of fingerprints that we found in 5 different burglaries, they are of the same person. We don't know who that person is, but when the fingerprints come up, they're arrested. Likewise with DNA, you gather DNA samples, and then you eventually get the villain, and you can match them to 10, 20, 30 rapes, murders, or whatever else. But images are tended to be dealt with as a one-off. And here's a tactic we call face snapping. So the super recognizer would go through the database and they'd pick up that this guy, they'd see a couple of images, hold on, there he is again. And by searching it, these were thefts of high-value goods in Westminster, so they could put, show me all the white thieves in Westminster. All the database brings all the people up with that metadata, and you can see this man, Austin Caballero, he was in the press. He was our highest one, 43 crimes he was linked to. And then we turned the system on its head. So we knew that Caballero in the middle was a very active criminal. And so we found who he operated with, and those images were supplied to the human super recognizer officers. And then they scoured the database again, and they found them again. So we call this the domino tactic, because we brought all the gang down. So this is used to, you could use this for terrorists, active thieves, or any other criminal. And then it started to spread internationally. I started off my policing career, as I said, in Germany. So I was called back there. You may remember there's a lot of sex attacks in on New Year's Eve in Germany. And I was called back there to aid the German police. The super recognizers I took with me, the human super recognizers from London, they're all a bit bizarre, really. I think they're like aliens, because they actually linked in and found the German super recognizers just by a natural, strange business, really. And the Hillsborough Inquiry, I supplied 4 super recognizers to Hillsborough Inquiry. That's a horrible picture, but the people on the fence don't die. The people who died are in the middle as the as the barriers collapsed. And there was 96 people dead, but of those, 16 of them they hadn't found in the crowd footage. They didn't know how they got in and where they were when the crush happened. And the super recognizers, after they've been viewing it for 25 years, the officers I sent from the Met, they found one of them in 10 minutes, but they found the rest. The nicest story, I think, is that they found a footage of one of the victims, who was a young lad, walking to the ground with a big smile on his face, so that his mum's now got that picture on the mantelpiece. So it's not just about finding criminals, it's about finding victims. Likewise, just recently, one of my officers I recruited in the Met was used on the Grenfell Tower disaster to identify the people who are the victims, but also the criminals who were claiming that they lived there. So he checked all the footage for a month in the concierge and could say that that person's never entered here in a month, so he doesn't live here. That's how you get all the convictions of fraud. And this was a case where, this was the first case we used super recognized in a very active way on murder inquiries. So Alice Gross was a schoolgirl. She crossed this iconic footage in West London. She crossed that bridge. She walked over that, and then her killer, who was from East Europe, he cycled over there 10 minutes later. The usual tactic with CCTV, like the Riots or the Foxhampton Inquiry I did, is that the police would gather all the people who I used to call mutants together. So those people who are on bail, who had a bad head, a bad arm, a bad leg, or something else wrong with them, and they would be given to me and to do something with. And they're usually hopeless. I had a sergeant once given to me on the Foxhampton Inquiry who had sleep apnea and was colourblind. So I'm sure he was good at something, but it wasn't watching CCTV. So I said, look, we're not playing this ridiculous game, because if it was a murder and we had loads of potential DNA or fingerprints, we'd put our best people on it. So we recruited 10 super recognizers to view the footage. To give you some indication, these things are how long as a piece of string, but the murder squad have booked the CCTV room for 12 weeks. Within 2, the super recognizers have found an image of him going into a towpath area, another one, and coming out 45 minutes later. The actual ride was only 5 minutes, so he'd obviously done something. It resulted in the river being searched again. It had already been searched, and the body of Alice Gross was found there, tragically. He'd concealed her quite under a big heavy wheel. As it was, he was dead as well. The foxes ate him, so there was some justice in the whole case anyway. And then it was 2 of my super recognizers who found the Salisbury, the Salisbury assassins. So they went through thousands and thousands of hours of CCTV of people arriving in this country from Russia at various ports and airports. And then they went through all the footage at Salisbury and did this face snapping game where they found the suspects. Likewise, in a private capacity, one of my staff, you remember Khashoggi, he was murdered by the Saudis in Istanbul in the embassy. Having killed him, while his clothes were still warm, they put him on another man, a body double, and had him walking around the city to try and claim that Khashoggi was still alive. As from the super recognizer, they're very good also at saying that is not the same person, and this was a critical thing here. And also, it's nice to influence policing abroad. So in Australia, there's a super recognizer unit. There's at least 2 or 3 in Germany, and one being set up in France. So I've also found one in Japan. So it's moving ahead very nicely. You could ask, though, why are we bothering? You know, surely machines are the future. You know, why would we bother with people? But in the riots of 2011, all the images that we had, 4,000 suspects were put through the magic machine, and the machine managed to identify one person. And if you look in the middle, there's Boris as the mayor of London. The one person is the guy at the top, 410065. And you can see it's like a passport image. That's what facial recognition machines are made for. They're not made for any of the images you see down the bottom right, because they're either blurred or side face or masked or whatever else. But Gary Collins, who you can see with Boris when he was the mayor, who identified the guy with the red bandana, he identified 180. So humans are 180 times better than machines. There's one area of the world that we are good. But here's an interesting concept. It just shows how you can mix things together. So I had the world's first conviction for pattern recognition. So if you're HSBC or Marlboro cigarettes, you pay millions of dollars for that advertising space. Grand Prix, international audience, that is big time money. And they used to use old ladies with a stopwatch to try and work out how long images of adverts have been on the screen. Now they use software. And it's for a software, a logo is easier than a human face. A human face is quite complex. But the logos like that, HSBC or Marlboro, is very easy for the machine to see. And I thought, well, our villains wear all these logos. So how can we use that? And so we ran it across our programs. We found 2 images that you can see on the left of a man committing burglary. He's wearing the same T-shirt. They're a year apart. So he's either really grotty or he's got very few clothes. And then we found an image, his mugshot, with the same top on again. So now we know who he is. And so I gave that mugshot image of an old crime to the super recognizers, who then found him for 7 more in different clothes. So it shows how you can combine technology with humans to make a difference. But of course, we don't always need super recognizers. Luckily, villains are stupid. And if you are the cross-eyed Peckham arsonist, it does make sense to wear dark glasses, I would suggest. But so it's always good to see villains mess up. It's very popular at the moment. There's a TV show. There's 2 TV shows going to be made. One's a documentary, one's a drama series, fictional. I've said that Peter Kay can play me because he's got the figure and the accent. So, but if you read any of these books, the Peter James one in particular, I'm in it. It's quite weird to be in a fictional account of anything really. But Peter James writes a lot of. You can see 18 million copies. He's a rich man, so nice of him to write about me. And I would deal with some strange cases as well, privately. Possibly the strangest case my super recognizers have had to deal with was that an Indian man was told that his wife-to-be had appeared in an Asian Babes video in the 1990s. So one of my chaps had the arduous task of reviewing the said footage, which of course, in line with all forensic procedures, had to be peer-reviewed by somebody else. But we could happily tell the chap that it was not his wife who'd appeared in the video. But there's a Masonic twist to all these. As I say, my life often ends up combining. And this is a man we found out later, he's a member of my London Lodge. I'm the secretary of the Duchy of Cornwall Lodge, which meets at Great Queen Street. And McDowell was obviously a brave man because he won the Military Cross, but he was like he was the First World War cameraman. If you see any footage, he probably filmed it. And his film, The Battle of the Somme, was seen, as you can see there, by 20 million people, and it held the box office record until Star Wars. That was so. This is his film, and it contains this iconic image. Now, if you watch any drama if you watch a documentary series on the First World War, it will show this man being carrying a comrade through a trench. And as you can see, he's got no hat and he's got no tunic, so there's no distinguishing regimental badges. So I was asked by the Times newspaper, because 20 people were saying, that is my granddad. And so the Times asked me to review that with a super economizer, and you can see the image was matched to this man here is in the Durham Light Infantry. So the bizarre twist is that a member of my lodge filmed that, and 100 years later, me as a member of the lodge was asked to identify it. So it's a good old, nice little twist. Now, as far as Masonry goes, I joined in 95. As I said to you, I'm in many orders, and I'm the secretary of nine units. I don't mind being the secretary. I've never been the treasurer. I can't be bothered with that. I like being the secretary. And I'm an author. I've written these 2 books here. Please buy them. It will keep Mrs. Neville III happy and Mrs. Neville II away from my door, which is no bad thing. But the first one was written, Sacred Secrets was written because I remember I'm quite good at learning the ritual. You know, I did the charge as a fellow craft, a first degree tracing board as a master mason, all this sort of stuff. And I could do the second degree and all the lots. And I thought to myself, I've no idea what I'm talking about. I'm mentioning places, I couldn't find them on a map. I'm mentioning names, I don't know who's related to who. I'm using language I don't understand. So I've had enough of this. And so I scoured the ritual to link it to everything. I know I can point out every place. I've been to most of the places actually in the ritual. So I like to touch the stones of these places. I've been up at Mount Sinai where Moses got the 10 Commandments. If you do go up Mount Sinai, you must copy Moses and not me, because he went on his own and I went with a woman and she moaned all the way up and all the way down. So just take that to hints. But so Sacred Secrets was written to help Masons. So when they mention a person like Hiram Abiff, they can see where he's from or what he does. And then, of course, with my policing hat on, I was fascinated by the goodies and baddies in Freemasonry, and so I wrote Crime and the Craft. And of course, people love this. They love the idea of sex and scandal and the tales of people's crime sells. So I wrote this book, and then from really at the same time, I developed some walks around London, so I take people on tours around London. It's very nice. When the Tercentenary happened, I took 3 of the American Grand Masters on tours of London. I do a Masonic Jack the Ripper tour. If people like this, you know, people love all the why people. I remember I did a talk on Jack the Ripper at some at a Masonic hall, and 2/3 of the audience were women. And I spoke to one of the bar ladies after. I said, "What's your fascination with this?" You know, and she started going all red in the face. I think being a cynical detective, I think her fantasy was being grabbed by a man. I don't know, but it was a rum do. But so these books, the good thing about these books is that I've probably raised about £50,000 for different charities through lectures on these books, and I've been very fortunate to go to as far west as Ohio and as far east as Budapest doing it. So it's been a lovely Masonic experience for seeing all these people. And I just thought I'd give you a quick, sorry, but if there's any noise on there, forgive me, because I did try to get rid of them all. I just thought I'd give you one tale, for example. This is probably the most famous Masonic tale, okay? This is the tale of Frederick Seddon, who was a Mason from Liverpool. Now, being from near Manchester, I well know that all Scousers are thieves and vagabonds. I don't think there's any Scousers on here at the moment, but they will verify that. And so Frederick Seddon was a Mason in Liverpool. And in about 1011, he came down to London, and he fell in with this eccentric spinster called Eliza Barrow, who you can see, and she owned the Buckshead pub, which is still in Camden Market, and she had all sorts of shops and gold coins. And Seddon, who was quite a greedy man, said, "If you come and live in my house," which you can see next to him, she lived on the top floor, "we will feed you every day. We'll give you an allowance every week, and we shall look after you for as long as you live," which of course is not very long at all. He gave her a whopping dose of arsenic in the medicine bottle you can see on the right, which is in the Yard Museum at the moment, and killed her, buried her very quickly, and the relatives came knocking and said, "Look, where's the will?" And he told them to clear off. So they went to the Yard, and the Yard called in Sir Bernard, or later Sir Bernard Spilsbury, who's in the middle, and William Wilcox is on the left. They were the 2 most eminent pathologists of the day, and they exhumed the body and discovered that she, or could say that she had been killed with arsenic from the flypaper, they thought, but that both of these men were Masons. So I can give you another talk one day on the forensic developments from Masons, but these two particularly drove them forward. So he was brought to trial at the Old Bailey in front of His Honour, Sir Thomas Bucknell. That's Right Worshipful Brother Sir Thomas Bucknell, who's the Provincial Grand Master for Surrey. So the scene was set for the murder trial with the Mason in the dock and Bucknell presiding, and he was found guilty. And this is the only photograph of a death sentence in the Old Bailey. They think it was taken by a woman with a secret camera in a hat. And if you look to the left, you can see Seddon and his bald head in the dock with the police officer stood behind him. And if you look to the right, you can see Right Worshipful Brother Bucknell with the black cap on his head as the Padre has just put it on. This is the moment of sentence where he said, as judges do, because you've got to speak in a certain way if you're a judge, I suppose, have you anything to say that will prevent me pronouncing the sentence of death? And this is what's said to have happened. So he went like this. By the great architect of the universe, I am not guilty of this crime. And Bucknell was taken aback by this, actually. He was quite upset. But this is what he said. Our brother... As we all know, that the hangman said, step off with the left foot, but he didn't really, because no hangmen were ever Masons. It said, and you can read in my book, that it said that they weren't allowed to be. I've never seen the source of that, but that's from a newspaper report. But poor old Bucknell, he received a letter, which is actually in the yard, in the museum, and saying, he wrote a letter to a friend saying, I've been criticised by brother Masons. And I think he did the right thing. But this is a sort of research I do, and this is a sort of nonsense story that people want to hear, I suppose. But that's that's on the tour, and it's in the Crime and the Craft talk if you ever want it in your lodge. And also, I mentioned about my music there. I'm full colonel now, see, that's not bad from Bolton. But so I wear a jock hat because I'm in charge of all the pipers as well. But I'm in charge of all the Army Cadet music. I think Glenn's on here. There's at least one of the instructors on here right now. But and welcome to him. But I'm now in charge of all the Army Cadet music in UK and Gibraltar and wherever else it is. And that's bands, like full military bands, corps of drums, which you can see outside the Sanders there, and the pipes and drums. So, and just to show how it combines, so this is actually the cadets, as part, these are the senior cadets. They've got to plan an event as part of a BTEC award, but we actually use the RMBI home. So this is the Royal Masonic Benevolent Institute home near Hindhead in Surrey. They meet there. There's a manager you can see in the left-hand photograph. The cadets are going to ask him all sorts of questions about how they're going to set up the concert. And then you can see here that there's a residence, and they get a fantastic show, often with regular soldiers helping out as well, and the cadets. So it's a win-win. The residents of the RMBI home get a good show. In the photograph, I can see the Provincial Grand Master there, and he's always very good with the cadets. And a lot of Masonic money comes into the Army cadets to buy musical instruments and stuff. So it all works well together. And I do an annual tour of Gibraltar, where you can see a girl from Wales there with a white hackle instructing one of the Gibraltarian cadets in playing. And then, of course, for our youngsters, there they're playing. If you've been to Gibraltar, that's Casemates Square on the left. But as a young lad at 16, I came from quite a one-parent family. I was selected to go to Hong Kong adventure training, so I know that this traveling can make a difference to people, and so a lot of Masonic fundraising it goes into this, and so wonderful things it is. And so that is my life. It's very varied. I had a picture of Mr. Busier, the Mr. Man. He's my favourite character. But I do lots of lectures. I do travel. So if you do want some lectures in your, I do them for light blue clubs or for lodges, particularly installed masters or first principle lodges, and some of you I may have met. So there we are. I don't know if there's any questions.
Yeah, there's been a few questions, so I'm just going to I will read out the shorter ones, and I will unmute the guys for the more in-depth ones. So the first question, oh, I lost where I'm starting from. It's from Paul Robinson. Mike, where did you serve in Germany?
I was in Munster and Bielefeld.
Okay, thank you. The next one is from Liam Holmes from Essex Cornerstone Club. Mike, what has been the longest case that you have worked on, if you can say, and what was the outcome?
Well, the longest case was the London riots. That was the biggest investigation ever in the Metropolitan Police. So I was in charge of the gathering of CCTV, the production of the images, and identification procedures. And so, as I said, there's 200,000 hours of CCTV there. So that investigation went on for at least 2 years, because of the 4,000 cases, about 500 were arrested at the time, you know, looting a shop or something. Another 500 were arrested from fingerprints or DNA. The rest were CCTV, but of course the CCTV lasts forever, so they could be arrested for a long time afterwards. So that was the longest investigation.
That's great, thank you. The next question is from Joey Whittle. Joey, if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
Hi, Mike. As a criminal psychology student in my final year, part of my thesis and researching is into international crime, which involves terrorism. Yeah. Is it difficult at times to convict or even gain evidence surrounding terrorism using face recognition?
Well, it depends what you mean by face recognition, you see, because the actual, if you're talking about the electronic versions only work, as I say, in this sort of front-on thing. So if you imagine going to the airport, you stand there, you're compliant, you look at the screen, and it lets you through. As far as the human super recognizers go, as we saw with the Salisbury case, they don't necessarily need that sort of image. And also, these evidence doesn't stand alone. So if somebody says, I'm a super recognizer, I'm 50% sure that is whoever that terrorist is, then you can build a case by other means. You look at their phone records, you look at their computer use, you look at the CCTV in other places. And so often just getting a name gives you the start point of the inquiry. So facial recognition, whether it's by a human or by a machine, is just one aspect of identification, and then you can follow it up. Does that answer it, Joey?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
No problems.
Brilliant. Thank you for that one. The next one comes from Paul Ashby from Cambridge.
Yes, Mike.
Yes,
presumably these super recognizers look at things such as gait and mannerisms as much as faces.
I don't know. We tried to do this, so there is some element of gait, and because what we know is that they're better with moving footage. The human mind works better with moving footage rather than just still. So we actually know that. When it comes to what they're looking at, we've actually done eye tracking devices to see if they're looking at the eyes, the ears, the nose, whatever. And that has been inconclusive. They all seem to have their own idiosyncrasies. Oddly enough, I was looking at some Japanese super recognizers, and they just put a little, when they're memorizing photographs, they actually have a little piece of card that they put over so they can only see the eyes. So they actually memorize the eyes. So I think the eyes are key. But I absolutely agree that there is some element of gait and the like, because we know that moving footage is much more useful in
Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay, so the next question, and in the short time that I've known Matty, he absolutely is obsessed with Fred West and Rose West, and he's got a question for you regarding that.
Not in a creepy way, can I just say? Let's not incriminate Matty with this, because he's a nice chap.
Just to interject, it isn't creepy. I do get fascinated with crimes and things like that. But I'm from Gloucester, so I mean it's quite relevant anyway. But because we were just talking about the cases that you just projected onto the screen, I was just thinking of, for example, the case of Fred and Rose West. So I was thinking, do you think it would have changed anything in terms of consequences of what happened and what they've done if we had these preventative measures like CCTV on the streets or on the roads? And do you think that this has completely changed how you police compared to what you used to police?
I don't know, because with the likes of Fred West, there's some people you get away with murder for a long time if you do. So if you're murdering your own kids and no one really knows your family, then no one's there to ask anything, because they're quite an insolent. And also, if you kill drifters or people who, so if you look at the case of Dennis Nielsen, who was killing people in London, there's a book on him called Killing for Company. He used to like invite young gay men back to his house. He'd been a policeman, he'd been a soldier. But he would invite, so a lot of the gay guys in London at that time were from the north or from Scotland, where it wasn't accepted, so they'd been thrown out of their family. No one cared about them. So if you kill people like that, so if somebody killed me or you, so the following day somebody would be asking questions like, where are we? But if you kill people who no one asks questions about, you can get away with it for a long time. And some of Fred and Rose West victims were very much of that ilk. And you look at the Yorkshire Ripper, how he kills prostitutes. Most of those didn't have, they would be missed for a week or so because there wasn't the people, the home structure to look for them. So I think you could have as much CCTV as you wanted, but all they were doing was inviting a drifter back to their own house.
So do you think that was like a strategy that worked for them then? Because it was.
Yeah, but maybe it's something that maybe if you want to commit murder, if your lust is to kill people, then the best people you can kill, I suppose, are like tramps or homeless, because there's not somebody there to say, where's Fred? Because no one knows that he's dead, and no one cares. It's a really sad thing, but they're the people. And also the worst murderers to catch are those who are sane by day and mad by night, like Peter Sutcliffe. Because it's very easy if somebody's mad all the time they stand out. But if you're seemingly sane and then you just have these mad occurrences like Jack the Ripper, they think he's a homicidal maniac, then they're the worst. But I think you'll always get people like Fred and Rose West. They'll always come to the surface because they'll target that sort of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Horribleness, really.
I'll just highlight this this video. So just remember this face, chaps, because it might be popular in a few years' time.
Thank you, Mike.
Matthew, you had a few more questions. You want to ask them now while you're on?
I think there was one more just at the top. The one question was, Mike, how many people would you say you've rightfully assisted to put behind bars?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
My question was, how many people would you say you rightfully assisted to put behind bars?
Well, it was hard to say. I used to have, by unit at the yard, we would deal with about 2,000 detections every year with the CCTV, and that's over 8, 9, 10 years. The rest of it, I've got various commendations for arresting bank robbers and the like. A good 10,000, I think. I never really worked it out.
Great. Thank you very much.
The next question comes from Matthew Edson from Cornerstone.
Hi, Mike. Great talk. I just wanted to ask, out of all the Masonic sites you visited, what would be the #1 site that you'd recommend for anyone to visit if they were, say, on holiday in the local area?
Well, I like Rome. I do a Masonic tour of Rome. It's fascinating, really. So if you look at, I don't know if you're in chapter yet, but in the chapter you hear about the Titus destroying the temple in Jerusalem, the Second Temple in 70 AD. Well, at the start of the ancient city is the Arch of Titus, and on there you can see a frieze, which is where the victory parade is recorded, and on it you can see the trumpets of Jericho, the table for the showbread, and the menorah candlestick. So that's the only picture in the world, the menorah candlestick. The Colosseum in Rome was built with the money that they stole from Jerusalem. So when they trashed the temple in 70 AD, the money built the Colosseum. And then, of course, you got the Arch of Constantine just there. If you don't know, there's a Red Cross of Constantine, which is a Masonic order. And so I think Rome has got all sorts of fascinating links to Jerusalem. But I suppose the best place really to go, I don't know, is to go to Jerusalem. It's fascinating when you think Israel is the first foreign country you learn about as a child, because you do the nativity play, don't you, really? But it was wonderful. I had a great, I was wandering around there. Actually, I went to the Wailing Wall, and there was a very pious Jewish guy there, praying as they, rock their head backwards and forwards. And his phone went off and it had the Star Wars theme, so it sort of ruined the moment. So there, but I would go to, definitely recommend Jerusalem. I think the key Masonic cities really are Edinburgh. I think it really began in Scotland as we know it today. But London, of course, is full of Masonic sites in London, and I'll gladly show you around. But Rome and Jerusalem, they're the ones I recommend.
Cheers, thank you. It's my holiday sorted.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Thanks, Mike. The next question comes from Dave Bass of Purim Semper.
Hi, Mike. First, thanks for the talk. Absolutely. Well, you can make a season there, as I say. Do you think identity cards and DNA capture will be both useful and implemented in the future?
I don't know. I mean, I'm a big fan of CCTV, but I'm also very careful about how far it goes. I object to having CCTV everywhere. With DNA, they could take it off everybody at birth. But the thing is with criminals, they always find a way around these things. It's like identity cards. The first people to cheat identity cards would be criminals. So we already know that there are how many. I think there's about 3 of the national insurance numbers, that there's already, about 10% of them are completely fake. So I think ID cards, I never minded. I was a soldier, and I've still got my army ID card now, of course, and I had my police warrant card, so I didn't mind carrying it. I don't think ID cards are a bad thing, particularly to show you're entitled to use the NHS and the like. We could take DNA, but the thing is with DNA, it's not everything. So when somebody says, "Oh, there's a rapist," well, we've got the man's DNA in the victim. Well, that's it. Well, that's solved the crime. But if the guy said, "Well, she said she consented to sex," well, the DNA means nothing, because the guy said, "Oh, I did have sex with her, but she consented." So DNA is useful, but it's not often the silver bullet that people want it to be. So it's as I said with another question, it's a case of combining evidence. But I can see that you may be correct that I think ID cards and DNA will come in, but how do we stop? Then we get lots of the criminals who offend are foreigners, so we won't have their DNA on record until we arrest them, unless we make it a condition of entry. And would we do that? Because then every country would do it to us. It's hard to see how we would manage that, but I don't know. What's your view?
My view, personally, I think identity cards, most people have a driving license.
Yeah.
I think everybody who doesn't have a driving license should be issued with a dummy type driving license.
Yeah.
We've got the system, the infrastructure in place.
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing. It isn't a driving license, it's an ID card. So actually, I think the issuance of an ID card is not difficult. I think DNA is more emotive, because then you can, as you say, I know it's not the silver bullet, but I think in a lot of cases it would help, and it might deter people, and that might be more important than actually finding them. That sounds a bit wrong. But
the problem, I mean, but the trouble is, Dave, these days, at one point with DNA, you needed a milk bottle full of blood. Now it's so sensitive, it's picking up too many potential suspects. So it's picking up so many people, because the DNA is not. So a CCTV shot will tell you that a person was in that place at that time. Whereas with DNA, you find DNA in a house, the person's been there, but you don't know when. So as it gets more sensitive, you get more and more identifications, and it could be just people who pass through. That's it's a difficult balance, really, sometimes.
But no, thank you for your talk. Anyway, very, very, very interesting.
No problems.
That's great, Mike. Thank you. One of the things we always say on this call is that we will stick to time, and we will try to end it as close to as 9:15 as possible. We do have questions left from Glenn, John McDonald's, Dave Little, James Irvin and Timmy, which I will pick up with you after, Mike, because I think what we might do is a little recorded session afterwards and put that up on Facebook as like an extra session.
Yeah, I can answer anything.
I don't want you guys to think we've missed your questions, but we will get them answered and we'll get them up. I just want to give you as much as your Sunday evening back. Although it's really fascinating, and some of these questions and answers are brilliant. So I'll leave those ones, and we will come back to you with a separate recording on those. And with that, I'll hand back to Mitch.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Barry. Mike, once again, thank you on behalf of everyone who has joined into tonight's Young Masons Virtual Social. Your talk has been, I never for 1 minute thought it would be as entertaining in a humorous fashion that it has been. I bloody loved it. I think I speak to a lot of people when I say that. So thank you very much. Yes, please, brethren, we'll get Mike back for an extra video. So check your Facebook in the coming weeks once we sort that out with Mike. And Mike, just a quick one from me. Can we sign you up for when we're allowed to meet again, face to face and in person? Can we get you for a tour of London, a Young Masons?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we'll have a great time. And then a pub lunch or a curry in Brick Lane if we do Jack the Ripper in the evening.
Yeah, one of the comments said it looks like Mike can drink.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate thing, really.
Fantastic. So thank you for that. Brethren, we will end it right here. We're ever so slightly late, but I did miss Leeds Light Blues prior to doing their welcome. So I'd like to get Leeds spokesperson just to do a welcome and a thank you if you'd like to. So
I'll round this off then. Thank you very much to everyone for coming today. It was a fantastic talk by Mike. Welcome again to the Trelawny Club. Absolutely fantastic to have you with us. I had the privilege of visiting your fair province in November, just before lockdown, and had an excellent evening down at St Ives in Tregenna Lodge. So thank you from the Leeds Light Blues Club, and we hope to see you all again next week. Or whenever the next one is.
Fantastic, Josh. Thank you so much. Been in 2 weeks' time. We'll drop all the advertisements very shortly. And again, thank you on behalf of Mitch, Matty, and Barry. We thank you so much. Thanks again, Mike. And we're going to end with Cambridge Light Blues because I missed you too. It's not been a good week for me. But well, thank you. And just before I do hand over to Cambridge Light Blues, we'll take this opportunity to take a photo for social media purposes, etc. What we like to do is just raise a glass as we would for the time to toast. Alan Coleman, if you could take control of the time to toast, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. After 3, 2, 1, cheers.
Cheers.
Done, Mitch.
Thank you so much, Alan. And I'd like to hand over to Adrian Peters from Cambridge Light Blues to do your welcome, and feel free to end the chat today. Wherever you are. Or Tony, anybody?
No, I'm here.
Oh,
I'm here. Don't worry, I found it. Zoom's very new to me, I'm afraid. I'd like to welcome the Trelawny Club. Absolutely fantastic. Great night. Mike, brilliant speech and talk. I think everyone's enjoyed it this evening. Mitch, all of you guys, great every couple of weeks. I look forward to it, and I'd just like to say good evening to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, everybody. Thanks again, Mike, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next Young Masons Virtual Interclub Social. See you guys.